Hello knitters, Barbara Benson here. I'm an independent knitwear designer who also likes to make videos here on my YouTube channel, Watch Barbara Knit. Make sure to check in the description notes below the video. You'll find links to anything I talk about in the video, where to find my patterns so you can knit them up for yourself, how to join the Watch Barbara Knits Facebook group, and how to support me on Patreon. Today, I am going to be talking about the materials that needles are made of and what the difference between them and how I can help you, give you the information you need to decide what kind of needles you want to use. This is specifically aimed at beginning knitters, but I'm guessing will contain maybe some tidbits of information even for more experienced knitters. Hopefully, I try. I also have a second thing I need to talk about, which I'm going to do first, but if you want to jump right to the needle stuff, I'm going to put a link here someplace with a number, a timestamp for you to jump to so you can skip, because I have a little bit of business I need to attend to. Okay, so if you are a longtime viewer, you may have noticed that over the last few months, my videos have been a little different. And I'm always talking a lot, but usually my videos are talking videos interspersed with tutorial or instructional things where you see me physically knitting with my hands. Even I had some swatch videos planned and need to get those swatches done. The thing is, I have been struggling with knitting. For the last couple of years, I have had an ache in the joint here of my right hand on my thumb, and I've always assumed that it was just the onset of arthritis because it runs in my family. But over the last few months, it has gone from just an ache and an annoyance to really a fairly intense pain, and it's radiating down and across. So it's something I need to really get looked into. I can use my hand and I'm usually okay, but it's getting harder and harder. And especially like yesterday, I was trying to hold a pen and it really hurt. And doing any amount of knitting puts a lot of stress on the joint and it hurts. So I haven't really been able to get a lot of knitting done. I have things that I need to be knitting and it's just not happening because it hurts. I mean, it's just hurts. And what happens if I do any amount of knitting, then my hand is pretty much useless for the rest of the day. And I need this hand. Last night I was trying, after I worked all day yesterday, I was trying to put my hair in a ponytail and it hurt so bad I could almost not get the ponytail in. So that is why you haven't been seeing a lot of tutorial or knitting videos. I'm doing my best. I'm trying to get an appointment with a doctor. Right now, there's actually a hand specialist here in Sarasota whose name is Dr. Hand. Like, that's his legit last name, which is hysterical. And I called and they are booked through December, but they took my name and they'll give me a call if they can work me in. So I'm going to keep on calling and seeing if I can get an appointment. I've discussed this types of pain I've been having with other people, and I'm thinking that it is a tendon issue. And honestly, I'm hoping that it's a tendon issue, because if it's a tendon issue, it can be hopefully repaired with physical therapy or surgery. If it's arthritis, I don't know what's going to happen, but that is why I felt I needed to tell you. So now we are going to go into the actual subject of this video, and we are going to talk about the different materials that needles are made out of. This is a question I frequently get because people come into the store and they're like, I need a needle. And I'm like, do you want wood or do you want metal? And they're like, ooh. Which one is better is normally what is asked of me. And the thing is, neither is better. It is almost 95% personal preference. It is what you like to knit with. But if you're a beginning knitter, you don't know what you like to knit with. So I wrote some categories to think about for what kind of needles you may or may not like. and what the different materials bring to the table. I also have another fairly extensive video talking about different aspects of needles, and I will link that in the description below. And some of this is gonna be redundant from this, and hopefully some of it will be new and interesting. So the basic that you come down to is wood or metal. Now I'm just talking about needles in general, because you have DPNs and you have straight needles and you have circular needles, and really almost everything I'm going to talk about applies to all of them equally. And the big difference functionally between wood and metal needles is how the stitches slide on the needle. Here is this is just a tip. So this is a tip off one of my interchangeables. This is a wooden needle, and this is a metal needle. And this is a metal needle too. There's all different kinds. There's different types of wood. There's different types of metal. But they all vary in how slick they are and how that stitch slides and advances. So if you are knitting with wooden needles, and you find that as you're knitting, you have to physically take your hand and scooch those, advance them, and you kind of are shoving them and putting some effort into it, it may be an indication that because of your knitting style and the tightness of your stitches, and I'm not saying the tightness is wrong, I'm saying that you might want to look into metal needles, that your tension is on the tighter side, and that's fine. I will link to a video about how you shouldn't try to change your tension. The metal is going to slide better. So if you feel like you're fighting to get them to slide along, metal might be a better choice for you. If your tension tends to be on the loose side, and you are finding that your stitches, when you're trying to knit them, are just falling off the needle and you have to pick them back up and put them on, and you're knitting with a metal needle, you might want to look into a wooden needle, because a wooden needle is grabbier. Now, there are different types of wooden needles. There are the polished wooden needles that have a certain level of slickness. They're coated, like they have varnish or something on it. And then there are unfinished, your more bamboo needles. Your grabbiest needles are your unfinished wood bamboo. They grab. They don't slide well. And if you are a looser knitter, that might be what you're looking for. The other element you need to consider is what kind of fiber are you knitting with. If you are just knitting with a wool or a fairly average, not average, because I'm sure it's beautiful, but a fairly typical type of yarn, metal or wood is usually fine. When you get into your slippery yarns, if you're getting into a silk or something that's fuzzy or drapey or bamboo, or some cottons, like mercerized cottons, if they're slick yarns, that is when you might want to start looking into a wooden needle, or even a bamboo needle, something that has some grab, something that will help your stitches stay on the needle. So basically what I was saying is you have metal needles, which are slicker, and wooden needles that are grabbier. There's more of a range of grabby in wooden than there is a range of slick in metal. Most metal needles have a fairly similar type of slickness. That said, so these are Chaogus and they are stainless and they are very slick. This is a Zing, which is aluminum, and it has got a little bit of grab. Nothing like a wooden needle, but it is not as slippery as this. Now, there are also plastic and acrylic needles. I don't use them, so I don't have any firsthand experience to speak on them. Most acrylic needles can be a little grabby. They're more wood. They can be warm to the hand. I'm not against acrylic needles. It's just not anything that I've worked with. So I can't give you, I'm talking about wood versus metal essentially at this point. One thing I want to mention is the material of your needle definitely affects your gauge. Okay? you can have a size 8 metal needle, a size 8 polished wood needle, and a size 8 unpolished, uncoated bamboo needle. And if you use the same yarn, you are going to get a different gauge with each of those needles, because the tightness that you wrap around and how it slides is going to be affected by that material. So if you've done your gauge and you need to move like a half size, if you're kind of in between, if you're just not quite on it, you might want to consider changing your materials. So say you needed to go up a little bit, you need a slightly bigger stitch, and you swatched on metal, go to a wooden needle, because the grabbier it is, the larger your gauge tends to be. Did that make sense? Because you just wrap it a little more loosely so it'll slide. So if you go up, it kind of goes up just a little bit. It's like a half step. So that is a consideration. Now, material was the number one thing I wanted to talk about. Dovetailing into material is the point on your needle. Different needles have different kinds of points on them, how pointy it is. Let me show you these three. Here we go. And I'm going to put this behind it so it'll focus. So we've got a wooden, an aluminum, and a stainless, right? Hello. So one of the things about metal needles is, because of the material they're made out of, they tend to hold a finer point. Now, when would you want a finer point? When you are working with lace, like lace patterns, not lace weight yarn, but actually, yes, lace weight yarn. When you're working with anything that is going to require a lot of tip manipulation, using that tip, if you're doing baubles, if you're doing picots, things that involve you doing a lot of manipulation with that tip, you might want a pointier needle. If you knit tightly, you might want a pointier needle. And so then your stainless needles are going to have your best points. This is an aluminum needle, which I very much like, but the points are not quite as pointy on these. There are aluminum needles that do have good points. You just look at the point. Your wooden needles, you are getting, I mean, this is a nice point, but you can get wooden needles that get much more blunt than this, which is not a negative. Again, as we're going back to slippery yarns or splitty yarns, yarns that have very loose plies, you may want a blunt tip, because if you're trying to knit something that is a splitty yarn that has loose plies and you're trying to knit it with something that has a really pointy point, you're going to split those stitches, and you don't want that. So a blunt needle might be a better choice for you on that kind of yarn. So again, so we're working with a splitty cotton yarn that's slippery. You're going to need wood to control your stitches. Another aspect to think about in your point is, how long is the taper? Now, here we go. By the taper, I mean, is when you get into these pointy needles, you've got, I can't see with my finger, you've got the distance from when you have this tiny circumference to getting to the full circumference of the needle. And there's an angle that's that taper. The thing is, the thing that sets your gauge is wrapping your yarn around the circumference here. If you wrap your yarn down on this point, you're going to get an inconsistent gauge. So you don't want to work on the points, you want to work on the barrel. So the longer this taper is, the more you need to be aware of where you're tightening your stitch. So just look at them. Some of them have longer tapers. Some people like the longer tapers. Again, if you're working with finesse and tight and little yarn, you might need that longer taper to manipulate the stitches. Again, metal needles tend to have pointier and longer tapers. Wooden needles tend to be blunter and have shorter tapers. Okay. Now, what else? Grab. I talked about grab. Another thing, this is something that can trip you up. The tip length. This is specifically for circular needles. Different needles have different tip lengths. And what I mean by tip length is how long is this portion of the needle. And as you can see, this one is this long, and look how short this one is, right? See, it's short. When you get into very small circumference circular needles, the tips get shorter and shorter. If you're working on like 9s, they can even be only that long. They get short. You can get 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch, 5-inch, and that's referring to how long the actual needle part of the circular is. And this is very much going to be personal preference, and it has to do with how you hold your needles. If you hold your needles like I do, like this, and do a lot of movement and manipulating here, it can be difficult to work with these shorter tips. The little tiny tips, the little 9 inches, you have to hold sort of like this because there's only a tiny amount of hard stuff to hold onto. So be aware of how long the tip is on the needles you are buying. You'll just have to learn what you prefer. There are longer ones, there are shorter ones. 4s and 5s are fairly typical as far as inches. The main goal of this video was to help beginners have a better grasp on when they walk into a store or when they're shopping online and they're trying to decide, do I want metal or wood needles, is to understand what different attributes these bring to the party. You need to know how tight you knit. Do you want pointy points? If you're doing circulars, how flexible do you want your cable to be? And how good is the join, which is the transition between the cable and the needle tip. So that is also important if you're looking at circulars. There is no better or worse material. There is just what you like. I can't, it's so hard because there are people who want me to tell them what to buy and I can't, but I can help you work through what is going to work best for you. And you might get a project that you need a different needle for because you're knitting with a type of yarn that you have not knit with before. So I would love to hear in the comments below what your needle preference is. Do you like long tips? Do you like short tips? Do you like wood? Do you like metal? Is there a particular brand you like? I know that people get very attached to things that they like. I have all different kinds of needles, and some of them it's just idiosyncratic to that particular needle and it serves a particular purpose, and I just love it. Also, I really almost only knit with metal needles, but a lot of the metal needles are nickel plated, and I have a chemical reaction between my skin and nickel plating that makes the coating get all squeaky and weird. So I stick to stainless and aluminum, and that is something I need to mention you might want to consider. If you wear jewelry and you have discovered that you have a nickel allergy, or if you wear a nickel plated piece or earrings and it tends to get black very quickly, then you might want to avoid nickel plated needles and look for the aluminum or the stainless. There are also carbon fiber. There are even glass needles. It's the sky is the limit, but it's super frustrating to knit if you're fighting with your needle. So taking the time to figure out what needles you like and getting ones that make it a joy to knit, I think it's really worth the time and the investment. So if you have any questions about needles, let me know. If you have any more specific things you'd like me to talk about, again, let me know. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, click that like button. And if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video, please subscribe to my channel and select notifications. Thank you so much.